Okay, I'm going to start this video reading an article from Screen Rant that is quoting writer Bob Gale, who co-produced Back to the Future with Robert Zemeckis. He says here, "The thing I think about is that the relationship between Marty and Doc, which you completely buy in the movie. Today, studio executives would be overthinking that and say, wait, is Doc a pedophile here? Why is he hanging out with this kid? Why is this kid hanging out with Doc? Nothing of the sort, of course, not one iota of that. We see the movie and you just kind of get that, okay, these are both rebellious characters who feel a connection with each other. And there's nothing else beyond that other than Marty thinks Doc is a really cool guy. And Doc thinks, hey, Marty is a kid who maybe I can give him something. He's the son I never had. He's inquisitive. He doesn't judge me." Now, I had never even considered that the relationship between Doc Brown and Marty could potentially be viewed as inappropriate. To Bob Gale's point, the way it's portrayed in the movie, you don't really get that idea. But since he brought it to my attention, I figured, well, now it's fair game. Let me go through the movie and see if there's anything that might actually point to this being some kind of relationship along those lines. So I went back and I watched the first Back to the Future film, part 1, for the first time in a long time. I mean, I haven't seen it in years. And I noticed something very interesting along these lines, and I'll just pass it along to you, and I'll let you decide if there's anything to all of this at the end of the video. What I noticed in particular is that there is a scene towards the end of the movie where Marty McFly is wearing this shirt that I have up on the screen now. It's the only scene in the movie where he's wearing only the shirt. There's a couple scenes before it where he has a jacket on covering it, but this is the only scene where he has this shirt on, and those of you who follow what this symbol can potentially mean will quickly understand the weight of him having this shirt on. Wait a second, we see this symbol in a lot of places that do indicate pedophile activity. So it's suspicious, to say the least, to begin, that Marty McFly is wearing this shirt. And when you go to the actual scene, it's the one where they are testing the plan, where they will attach the pole to the DeLorean to have it catch the wire that is attached to the clock tower, which will be hit by lightning and create the amount of energy needed to send the DeLorean back through time. They have this scene where they're practicing this. They set up a model. And this is that scene right here. You can see the makeup of the street and the clock tower. And they have this toy car that they wind up and they test everything. So you can see here Marty wearing this shirt with this symbol on it. He's a young kid. 17, they say at the time, with this old Doc Brown. What I find very interesting are the glasses or protective eyewear that they chose to put on Doc Brown's head here, and that he later puts on his eyes when he does the experiment, because I don't know about you, but because there is the see-through aspect to the middle, this very much looks like what is referred to as panda eyes. So now we're in the realm that's probably not coincidence, where you have this young kid and this old man in a room together. One of them has this symbol on his shirt and the other has the panda eyes. Also, in this scene, they tend to touch each other a lot, which is kind of outside of the norm of the rest of the series. I mean, they're in the same shot a lot, but they rarely touch each other. Here and there, it's transpiring, but they make it really noticeable in this scene with him kind of steering Marty McFly And then at the very end of the scene, they show Marty relaxing on the back of Doc Brown. And in this respect, the choice of Michael J. Fox for this actor is potentially very intentional because, yes, he's 17 in high school in terms of the plot of the movie, but he is very boyish looking. He looks very young. You could easily mistake him for a 13-year-old kid. Even though at the time, I think the actor Michael J. Fox was in his mid-20s, right? He just has that young face. Even now, he's, I think, 60 or around there, and he still looks relatively young because he has this very babyish looking face compared to his age. You could mistake him here for a 13-year-old kid, you know? He looks very young. And so young, in fact, that later in the trilogy, they dressed him up as one of his own daughters. He's so boyish and feminine looking that he was able to pretty easily play a female character, is my point. So in this context, his casting would be very intentional in terms of giving this impression subconsciously to the viewer throughout the whole film that this relationship is between an old man and a very young boy, even though, to Bob Gale's point, when you're just watching it without that knowledge, it seems very natural and there's nothing nefarious going on. So it's actually crazy. They do this test, which, if you're using the metaphor here, an inappropriate relationship is going on. Doc Brown, the old man, is in a room with the young boy, Marty McFly. They're engaging in this experiment, this test experiment, which would be the inappropriate sexual relationship. And that's what creates the lightning strike when everything comes together. And then the car drives off the table into a bin full of old rags and it catches fire. And then Doc Brown has to put out the fire, right? This is very metaphorical of that potential relationship that's going on and what transpired. And then within the plot of the movie, Marty McFly's mother comes to the door and they both start freaking out. Now, in terms of the plot, it's totally natural, right? They're back in time. His mother doesn't know that it's his son because Marty traveled back to when she was younger. And you're not thinking anything of it because of that. But in the context of this, his mother has caught them. She has found the young boy with the old man. And they both freak out. Doc Brown makes this face with those glasses on after he just put out the fire. He's kind of holding that in a very suggestive way. and he says, quick, cover the time machine. Like, quick, cover up what we were just doing. And they both scramble to cover everything up. If you will permit me to channel the youth, this is very sus, shall we say. Very suspect that this scene transpired with Marty wearing that shirt that he's wearing right here, with this symbol on it, in the context that I just went into it. Now, maybe that's a just one-time thing, right? Maybe that was just a coincidence. So, based on what Bob Gale said, after I looked at this scene, then I said, okay, let's go look at other Zemeckis movies. Is there a trend that's potentially going on here? And before getting to that, one of the first things that popped in my mind was what I have up here, which is a comparison I put together between actor Sidney Pollack and Robert Zemeckis. Sidney Pollack is on the left, Zemeckis is on the right. Now, this again is an ordinary thing in the world that happens all the time. There can be two people that just kind of look alike. And I would say that Sidney Pollack and Zemeckis kind of look alike. They have a very similar vibe. They're similar age. They're both wearing glasses and have a similar hairline and ears and just a similar look to each other, where you could potentially mistake one for the other person. This is fascinating to me because, of course, Sidney Pollack was the actor that Stanley Kubrick chose to play Victor Ziegler in Eyes Wide Shut. And the character Ziegler in that film is the guy who's in the club, who's in the rituals that Tom Cruise's character has stumbled upon. And he's the one kind of explaining the game to him. So just very interesting to me in the context of what is going on in that film, Eyes Wide Shut, that Ziegler looks a lot like Zemeckis. Now, as I'm sure all of you guys know, there is a Disney film released in 1940 called Pinocchio. And this is an adaptation of an 1883 children's novel by Italian writer Carlo Collodi. Pinocchio was carved by a woodcarver named Geppetto in a Tuscan village. He is created as a wooden puppet, but he dreams of becoming a real boy. He is known for his long nose, which grows when he lies. Pinocchio is a cultural icon and one of the most reimagined characters in children's literature. His story has been adapted into many other media, notably the 1940 Disney film Pinocchio. Collodi often used the Italian Tuscan dialect in the book. The name Pinocchio is possibly derived from the rare Tuscan form Pinocchio, pine nut, or constructed from pino, pine tree, pine wood, and occhio, eye. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there, of course. In the context of the relationship between Doc Brown and Marty being very inappropriate, we now have some added insight. First, let's just note the name of the character who's involved in this other story of an old man and a boy. Geppetto and Pinocchio. Say it again. Geppetto. Geppetto. G-pedo. Geppetto. Okay. Pedo. That's the name of the character. And of course, you will not be surprised to learn that Robert Zemeckis was chosen to remake Pinocchio in 2022. And guess who it stars? Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks actually plays Geppetto. First, let's go to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who plays Jiminy Cricket, which is the conscience of the story, the conscience of Pinocchio. Obviously, Gordon-Levitt played Philip Petit in Robert Zemeckis' remake of that whole story, The Walk, where Petit walks between the two towers on a wire. And so you have this whole connection between Back to the Future, The Walk, and 9/11 as it relates to that flaming 9/11 that's made in the aftermath of when they actually do send the DeLorean back in time. And it flies into the movie theater that's playing The Atomic Kid, which takes on a whole different meaning too, where the end of the ritual is the atomic kid, right? The explosion that took place within the child that was abused. But you can see here that Joseph Gordon-Levitt in these scenes is on top of the World Trade Center wearing an outfit very similar to what Marty McFly wears in Back to the Future Part 2 when he comes back a second time. And the whole plot takes on a new meaning too when you consider it in this way, because the whole story is kind of about Marty saving his family. In the context of what I'm going into here, it's like the relationship between Doc Brown and Marty and their quote-unquote time traveling is so dangerous that it's potentially resulting in the erasure of his entire family. Because that's what this kind of thing does when it goes on. But anyway, because of the connection to the Twin Towers and the Twin Pines and the Lone Pine and the 9/11s that are all over the film, Zemeckis very intentionally had Petit on top of the World Trade Center dressed like Marty McFly, going back in time or back to the future. And think about Philip Petit's name. Philip Petit, P-E-T-I-T, Pet It, which is very similar to pederast, which is a misspelling of the word pederast, made popular by the Big Lebowski, defines as one who practices anal intercourse, especially with a boy. And obviously, pederasty has a long history going all the way back to Greece and Rome and well beyond that. I mean, it's written down in the history of Greece and Rome, so we at least know it was going on there for sure. But very interesting, right? You have Philip Petit, pederast, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who is dressed up to resonate with Marty McFly, who's potentially in this inappropriate relationship, who then is cast by Zemeckis as Jiminy Cricket, the conscience, in Pinocchio, where you have Geppetto trying to bring this real boy to life. And it's so interesting. I was thinking about this, the really sick and twisted thing that they put in Pinocchio here, where if you look at the way his finger is pointing towards his little nose, I mean, that very much resembles like a little boy's penis, his nose. And in the context of the plot, they're constantly talking about how, oh, well, if you tell a lie, your nose will grow. And think about the kind of mind control that is in a subconscious way, where they have the audience associating the nose becoming erect, growing, in a way that it's a lie. So they're basically telling your mind to lie to itself about what it's really seeing, right? They place the lie in the context of this thing that's transpiring that you perceive as wrong. So it confuses you. Because you're like, oh, his nose is growing, he's lying, he can't do that if he wants to become a real boy. And that would tie into any of these people actually speaking the truth, right? If they told the truth about what's going on, it would be perceived as a lie. So to become a real boy, they have to transcend that. It's very sick and twisted. I didn't promise you that any of this would be easy to digest. So going back to the Back to the Future series and the meaning of Pinocchio as eye and pine tree or pine nut, you have these Twin Pine Mall scenes and the Lone Pine Mall scene, where it's the twin Paul at 9/11 when Marty arrives to this very inappropriate meeting with an old man at 1 a.m. in a mall parking lot that you never really consider until you consider this angle. And then after the quote-unquote time travel takes place, after the energy creates this event that sends Marty through time, potentially creating this new parallel reality, these new alters in his mind, he arrives back at Lone Pine Mall, which is a different way you could view the 9/11 ritual, where it's the two hemispheres of the brain that are destroyed in a controlled demolition, and then one new consciousness or personality or just being in general rises from those ashes and flips forward into perception to perceive the world through the screen that is the eyes. Pinocchio, Occhio, eye, pine eyes. And that gets more deeply into the other aspect of the ritual that is implanted here subconsciously, which is the whole 9/11 part of it, where the movie screen is the monolith. You have the Millennium Hilton at ground zero. And like the gelatin art group showed everyone, they stood in the Millennium Hilton and took pictures of them doing the art installation on the balcony that they made. They took those pictures because that was the ritual, right? You were seeing the ritual from the screen, from the Millennium Hilton. That was the screen that we all watched those planes fly into those towers, and then those towers come down through. So they did the ritual beforehand. The person who was their handler, the gallerist, Koenig, he set that up in the Millennium Hilton. He got that room to take those pictures, and then he set their exhibition for September 11th, 2001, because obviously he knew, like Zemeckis knew, like they all know when they're at a certain level, the Victor Ziegler level, and they put it out there for us to see, if we had the eyes to see it, which none of us did before it happened. And that's kind of the contact angle of the Zemeckis films that's also there as well. But this is a whole new angle, right? Or at least a new angle that I have never done a video on. Other people have talked about these things, and it's out there if you want to find it. Pinocchio, pine eye, pine nut, pine tree, twin pine, lone pine. And then, as Bob Gale would say, oh, well, no, actually, that was just Marty when he went back in time. He ran over one of the pines with the DeLorean and he changed the future. Now it's only one pine. It's innocent. Oh, just looking at Joseph Gordon-Levitt, just a little bit of kind of irrelevant trivia. He's actually married to a woman who used to sit on the OpenAI board, and she has all kinds of weird connections to that world and technology in general, which kind of plays into the movie roles that he's been given throughout his career, in addition to this whole theme, where he's Robin to Batman in the Dark Knight Christopher Nolan film. He's the boy that's with the man, Batman. But then he's also in Looper, where he's in this other interesting relationship with himself, traveling back in time to meet the child version of himself. Or that was probably confusing given the plot of Looper. There's a child involved, but Bruce Willis is Joseph Gordon-Levitt in the future, so he's interacting with himself. Kind of in the same way that Marty McFly does it in Back to the Future. So he plays that character in Looper, and then he's obviously in Inception as well, which is all about creating these dreams that are manipulations that convince somebody to do something, which is exactly what this stuff is. I think the other movie that recently came out that does a similar thing is the Venom series. The Venom series is the most realistic movie that's ever been put out, because that's what this stuff is. It's Venom. It's an alien in all of our minds, convincing us to do things that we otherwise know we shouldn't do or would never want to do. If you watch that film in the way that I just described it, it'll make so much more sense. That's what Venom is. They're almost personifying their subconscious programming into a character and putting it in a Marvel film for you to see. But I brought that up as it relates to Gordon-Levitt being connected to Zemeckis and Contact and what his wife is actually doing in the real world in relationship to technology and AI. So, Tom Hanks is cast by Zemeckis to play Geppetto in Pinocchio. And then, obviously, of course, Tom Hanks is cast by Robert Zemeckis again to play the character in Castaway. And what is the plot of Castaway? Remind me here. It's a guy who gets on a plane that crashes and lands him on a deserted island, where he makes friends with an imaginary character called Wilson that is a bloody face painted onto a volleyball. A plane crash, like what transpired in the 9/11 ritual, again referring to this idea of planes of existence being shifted or changed. And then he's on a deserted island with a Will son. I'm sure you all remember this. This is him posing with a replica of it. It's a Wilson volleyball with this face painted on it. This is the real one. That's probably a better view of what they were going for. And remember, later in the movie, they show the volleyball being destroyed a little and it blows out the top. And he puts this straw in it that looks like hair. So it's like the atomic kid. You see, there was a nuclear explosion within Will's son. And it resulted in this image. And this is Tom Hanks' best friend on the island. Right? What's the other island that was in the news a few years ago? Where similar things were going on along these lines? The will of the son is taken through these inappropriate relationships, through this abuse, through whatever they're doing in these rituals. Maybe I made all that up. Could just be a giant coincidence. Maybe this is just my mind creating things out of nowhere. Or maybe it's very real. Again, I will let you decide on this video. These are just a couple images I had up of Marty McFly in relationship to just how boyish he looks and how young he looks. And then they dress him up. Remember, Doc Brown bought these clothes for him, and it's a young child's, like a young boy's cowboy outfit that's kind of very effeminate. That's what Doc Brown chose for him to wear. And if you want to get really dark with this, think of the name, Doc Brown. What else is brown? Where does it come from? What would happen in these rituals? His first name's Emmett. Emit Brown. Doc Brown's actions emits Browns. Do you see? I mean, the only thing I can do is laugh because it's so disgusting and sick. I don't know. It's my defense mechanism. I don't know what else to do. Marty McFly. McFly wants to fly away from whatever's going on when this transpires. But in the background of this picture right here, it's Orgy American style playing at the theater in 1985 Hill Valley. Maybe another wink and a nod to what's really going on here. Behind the scenes. With the people who run in circles like Victor Ziegler did in Eyes Wide Shut. And interestingly, throughout the whole first part of the movie, in the part one, he's wearing a life vest that they make note of in the dialogue multiple times. Hey, are you a sailor? And this is getting at this idea he's wearing a life preserver, right? He's drowning in whatever is going on through this relationship, and that's him trying to stay alive. And it's so interesting, right? When he's in the first scene in the movie, in part one, he's in Doc Brown's house with all the clocks that are all set to the same time, which you just assume is, the time travel experiment stuff going on. And there's a scene of Einstein's dog food being dumped into a bowl, which could look like something else splattering on the floor. And then they show Marty set up the amp, get everything ready, and he's blown out by the frequency. He gets blown out by the speaker, the round speaker that blows him back. and destroys the room. And then the next scene is him answering Doc Brown's phone call and going out on a skateboard to the power of love. Likewise, the first song that plays when he goes back to Hill Valley, after he goes back into the future or into the past, is Mr. Sandman. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Make him the cutest that I've ever seen. Give him 2 lips like roses and clover. Then tell him that his lonesome nights are over. Sandman, I'm so alone. Don't have nobody to call my own. Please turn on your magic beam. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. What? Okay. Do you see how this could be a dream along the lines of somebody like Doc Brown having for a young child? And just because this is how this stuff works, the actor who was cast to play Pinocchio in Zemeckis' remake of Pinocchio was also in a TV series titled The Sandman. And The Sandman is a Neil Gaiman show. Also, randomly starring Patton Oswalt. And Neil Gaiman is all over the news for allegedly engaging in sexual abuse right now. This is it. The allegations of sexual and emotional abuse against author Neil Gaiman, along with claims about a relationship with his son's nanny. Gaiman denies most of them. Now, those of you who are familiar with Rick and Morty, which is pretty clearly a reboot of Back to the Future in terms of the relationship between Rick and Morty. Rick is Doc Brown, Morty is Marty. They acknowledge that in what they say about it, the creators of it. But there is a not so well known, unaired kind of pilot of Rick and Morty where they very clearly make this kind of association going on between Marty and Doc Brown. And I'll just play this scene right here.
Doc and Marty was pretty disgusting, mostly revolving around Doc trying to get Marty to perform various sex acts on him.
Marty, we have a problem. The time travel car won't start. Oh no! What can we do? What are we gonna do? My chapped, bloody testicles, Marty. What?
But I remember.
So, there are a bunch of scenes where Marty performs sex acts on Doc Brown. Or not, maybe not a bunch, but it's alluded to a lot. And they actually do show it one time that I can remember. It's hard to find this episode now. I couldn't find it in full. But understand what's going on here. You have the actual creators of Rick and Morty, which is loosely based on this relationship anyway, giving you this impression in one of their unaired pilots that, oh yeah, that's what this was about. And before you are aware of everything I've gone into in this video, you wouldn't even think that. You'd say, oh, that's just people doing what Roiland says here. I think this is Roiland. I don't know who this is actually, but whoever this is says, oh yeah, I was just trying to shock people to get attention. Okay, maybe we'll take him at his word. That's what they were trying to do. But in the context of everything else I've gone over, it's very suspicious. And, of course, Dan Harmon is one of the creators of Rick and Morty. And he got in a bunch of trouble a few years ago in terms of public perception when a video emerged of a graphic 2009 sketch in which he plays a therapist who repeatedly molests babies. That's the guy who made your lighthearted comedy on NBC Community. That's the guy who created Rick and Morty. That's what he was doing in his spare time. That's the guy who was involved in Roiland, who was involved in the pilot that's showing them Doc Brown and Marty engaging in sex acts. And remember from the Gelatin Bee art group video that this was a big rabbit they put in Italy, the same place that Pinocchio takes place, and they called it Plush Boy. This dead rabbit they have just laid out on the ground here for some reason. It's called Plush Boy, the bee thing. And Robert Zemeckis, in between filming all of the Back to the Future films, made the Roger Rabbit live-action film. And in that film, Christopher Lloyd, or Doc Brown, plays Judge Doom, and involving the rabbit hole, going down the rabbit hole, and how all of this stuff is Alice in Wonderland. The doom that all of this represents. And this relates to The Shining as well, and Room 237. The room was inhabited in the past by Lorraine Massey, who would usually seduce young bellboys who would visit her room. One time, Danny Torrance visited this room after a ball strangely rolled to him from its open doors. Later, he claimed that a crazy woman tried to strangle him. Jack Torrance then entered 237 in search of what his son claimed to have confronted. He instead encountered a young naked woman in the bathroom having a bath who came out and kissed him. That woman then became a rather ugly, rotting old woman who chased Jack out, cackling at his infidelity. It is assumed that the rotting old woman is Lorraine Massey. So the child, Danny Torrance, is lured into room 237, which again is about seducing young boys. And there are undertones of that thing going on between Jack and Danny as well, being the source of all the problems in that family originally. But I bring that up specifically because in the new Sonic 3, there's a scene where they are attempting to break into this fortress that is impenetrable. And when they get to the part where they're trying to steal a key that they need for this special weapon, one of the characters tells them that it's in the 7th row, 23rd cabinet, or 237. And just the interesting part of the whole thing was that it was the security server. So there's something with 237, the attempt to take advantage of young boys or young children, and room 237 itself. It's some kind of security server, right? In terms of what's going on here, really. And this whole thing then takes on a different meaning as well, where originally, when they're in the mall parking lot, Doc Brown tells Marty, when this thing gets to 88 miles per hour, you're going to see some serious shit. Now, if you think of it, I'm sorry to do this to you, in the terms that I've been going into in this whole video, that phrase takes on a whole new meaning as well, as does the aftermath that they show here going into the Atomic Kid screening. The Atomic Kid, the will of the sun. This bloody face on a volleyball that is the friend of Geppetto on a deserted island in Castaway, which is exactly what this does to the people engaged with it. They are cast away from society in general, just from everything. Their soul is cast away from God. And a part of this subconscious programming and everything that's going on with it is to cast you away with them. Ziegler is Zemeckis. One example of that kind of thing in the actual real world, who is still alive. Jiminy Cricket, the conscience of Marty McFly, is walking the wire between the two towers. Jiminy Cricket, the conscience of then Pinocchio, the young boy who can't tell a lie or his little nose becomes big. If he wants to become a real boy, he can't lie about what's going on. And in their mind, they program what has transpired to them as being a lie by creating different alters that come forward. And it's a whole new personality that doesn't even remember the abuse took place. And that is what these movies, culture, society in general, is doing to us on a mass scale. So that we see a lie and don't register it. Our immune system doesn't fight it off because we associate it with being something that isn't real or can't happen in some way. Tom Hanks is Geppetto. Marty McFly and Doc Brown, a very inappropriate relationship going on there. As evidenced by the shirt Marty is wearing and the goggles, the panda eyes that Doc Brown has on in this scene. Oh my gosh, it's your mother! Quick, hide everything! I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's unbelievable that they would actually put this in a film. Pinocchio, pine nuts, or constructed from Pino, pine tree, pine wood, and Occhio, eye, the pine nuts, pine tree, pine trees, pines, twin pines, two eyes, pine Occhios, become one pine. Twin pine, lone pine. Young boy. In an inappropriate relationship here, being potentially abused by Doc Brown. I don't know, man. This is all pretty suspect. Like I said at the beginning, you can make up your own mind about what is potentially going on here. Again, maybe I made all of this up. Maybe this is quote-unquote pareidolia or something along those lines. Come up with whatever excuse you want. One more thing that I want to get into before I end the video is that anytime this subject is brought up, there will always kind of be a reference to far-right groups in the way that The Guardian does it here with the Dan Harmon article. And obviously that is mostly related to the artificial QAnon movement that is connected into Pizzagate as well, which spun this tale about this kind of abuse and other things going on with kids being done by the deep state that is primarily Democrat politicians in the United States of America. So they turn this issue of pedophilia into something that's only going on and being perpetrated by Democrats. At least that's how the whole QAnon thing, which is connected to Donald Trump, obviously, sells it to those who consume that propaganda. They say it's the deep state doing it. Now, there is something true about that term deep state as it relates to the people that are maybe doing this. I don't know. I can't prove it. I've never experienced it or seen it in my own life. So I'm just going by what they show us in the movies and all the other symbolism and news stories. But if it's true that this is going on some level, then the people who are doing it are in a deep state. They are in the abyss, in other words. They have been cast away into the abyss for what they have done to other human beings. They are in a deep state in that way. It's a kind of a state of being or a state of mind. And obviously that state of mind would transcend any kind of party lines in one country. If it's going on, it's something much bigger than a few operatives in the democratic political machine. And I just bring that up because surely someone might come across this video and think that I'm one of them, and that's why I'm talking about this. And it's like, no, go back into my older videos and see where I expose how QAnon was a psyop from day one. As it related to creating the conspiracy theorist caricature that everyone would kind of think of and would be promoted by the media in that way so that it could kind of discredit anything that might actually be true. Any kind of kernels of truth in there would be totally discredited by the people who discuss it and how they discuss it. And I still don't fully understand that gambit. I mean, I don't understand pointing your own finger at something this evil. I don't get it. Why would you make a point of putting it out there? You could speculate all day on why they're doing that. I mean, maybe the end game here is to make pedophilia into a thing that's added to LGBTQ, or it's minor attracted persons, and it becomes something that's normalized and accepted in society in the same way that the other things are. So maybe you create this QAnon movement to promote only part of the truth of what's really going on in the world in this sense, so that it enters a certain level of notoriety where it can be discredited and then turned into something more respectable. Like, oh, okay, yeah, you guys are kind of right. Like, this is a thing that people suffer from, but it's a real affliction that is a condition that people are born with and they can't help. So we need to accept them like we accept anybody else who's on that spectrum. Maybe that's why they're doing it. I don't know. It's an interesting thing going on, because if it were me, I would think, I don't want to draw any attention to this. But I suppose in the internet age, things are going to get out and you have to get in front of it, which is the point of controlled opposition. So maybe that's why they're doing it. I don't know. But I just wanted to add this note at the end here that critique this video however you want to critique it, but know that I am in no way related to or a part of any of these quote-unquote far-right movements. The will of the sun becomes the atomic kid. There's the explosion out from the son who is abused by Geppetto, or Tom Hanks, who is cast away on the island doing these things. The plane crash. Zemeckis puts him in the movie in this way to connect with the plane crashes on 9/11, relating to the alters that are created in the mind when this transpires. The trauma produces that new personality, as it were, that new thing you make contact with. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is Jiminy Cricket, Pinocchio's conscious. He's the little boy's conscious, who is Marty McFly, the little boy, purposely cast to represent a little boy. And it's Zemeckis doing all of this casting and creating all of these stories and presenting him like he is. Zemeckis made all of these movies with all these characters. So obviously he knows what's going on. The man and the boy, which is Tom Hanks, Geppetto and the boy. In a way, too, it's Forrest Gump. It's the character that is just a little off because of all this and doesn't understand society and just kind of walks his way through life unaware of what's really going on. the character that had the disability as a boy, right? Had to break free. He, in a way, had to become a real boy, right? He had wooden legs, like Pinocchio. And he had to run out of the braces to eventually become what he was. It's all the same thing that Zemeckis is showing you in all these Tom Hanks movies. It's probably in Here too, that new one he did, called Here, Here. Dr. Doom, Doc Brown. The doom of that. This is the doom of it. The will of the son is taken away. Quick, hide the time machine. Your mother's here. I mean, it's sick, dude. It's crazy that they actually put this in the movie. This is, as I'm going to title the video, and as I will leave you with, Eyes Wide Zemeckis.